as yet another holidays eve is reined in, I'm gonna go ahead and break down week 17 of the NFL season. Now, yes, you see the title. Their asses are out. But it took so much for them to get to that point, so it only makes sense, yes, even with all the Christmas Day action, with a lot of the pretty solid games that took place over the course of this slate of games, it makes more sense for me to start off by following the trajectory that would oust the Hawks from the playoffs in the first place. So, I'll start off with the game itself. It was a Thursday night game between the Seahawks and the Bears. And I'm just going to say right now, if you are not a fan of defensive football, if you're purely an offensive-minded fan or a casual fan, you wasted your fucking time if you tuned into this game. And even with me liking defensive-minded games, I don't know, some stuff seemed very weird. Let's just start here, because on the very first drive, you have Zach Charbonnet putting in some pretty good runs in place of Kenneth Walker III, who was slated as being out for the season, as he was placed on IR. So, you would get him getting some nice runs. You would have Noah Fant follow that up with very solid catch before Kenny McIntosh would even step in and get a 25-yard gain on a run, which would actually happen to be the longest play of the night. And this was just on the first drive alone. Before you know it, they would get down to Chicago's 9-yard line, where they would stall out with a pretty inaccurate pass from Geno Smith and settle for a field goal. Multiple punts would ensue before the Bears would go on a single drive in which they were able to respond, in which Caleb Williams made some pretty solid screen passes to the likes of DJ Moore and DeAndre Swift to pick up yardage, simply because the linebacking core of the Seahawks were not necessarily accounting for the flats out there, and that created wide open space. They would continue to go to DJ Moore, and they nearly stalled out with a fumble forced by the defense before Caleb Williams would recover it somehow, some way. He literally scoops it up off the ground and then throws a laser to Keenan Allen to pick up a first down. It looked like that was going to be the drive for the Bears. And surely enough, on third down, inside the Seahawks red zone, Caleb Williams would actually manage to throw a pretty nice touchdown pass to Rome Odunze. However, his offensive lineman was called for holding, which completely derailed all momentum on that drive, and they would have to settle for a 42-yard field goal from none other than Cairo Santos. Right after that, the Seahawks would follow up with, trying their best to feed DK Metcalf. Because earlier in that drive, he would be going right at Tyreek Stevenson, pointing at him, putting his finger in his face and shit like that, just going at him, jawing at him. And it caused a penalty in the first place, so I guess he decided to just get activated from there. He would pick up some solid yardage on a 14-yard catch before they would get into Chicago's territory and stall out for a 50-yard field goal from Jason Myers. That would end the scoring for the night. I mean, it was atrocious, to say the least, even as a person who enjoys a pretty good defensive smash-mouth type of game. And I'll give credit to both defenses. As inept as the Bears' offense was, their calling card for a good portion of the season has been their defense. And Though, again, this team managed to get blown out by the Lions by 17 points just a week ago. They managed to more than do their job and try to keep the Bears in this game. Matter of fact, not even try. With their contributions, they were very much in this game. I mean, you had multiple just clutch stops. Even when it looked like the Seahawks are going to gain momentum, they would stop them right in their tracks. I mean, they were able to force 3 sacks and get 5 TFLs on the night combined. It's a pretty solid game. Not to mention that on a drive that looked promising in the third quarter, they would actually manage to force a fumble on Pharaoh Brown. It was initially a touchdown, but it was called back because Kyler Gordon was down by contact. But it was a great play by him nonetheless, and it gave the Bears a chance to do something immediately, which they would not. But they were still, defensively, hustling their asses off and contributing as much as they possibly could, despite their potential exhaustion from having to see the field that much over the course of the game. Seahawks defense as well, outside of the one drive that led to the Bears' only scoring of the night, they completely clamped up Caleb Williams especially. For a while there, he was maintaining his interception or consecutive passes without an interception streak, but he was feeling the heat. There were multiple points in this game where you saw him throw up some desperate passes or get passes batted down even by smart plays from the likes of the D-line. Boye Mafe gets up and deflects one. And then you would also have Rayshawn Jenkins crash in, making great plays. Jaron Reed, the veteran of this unit, would be making productive plays as well. All in all, 10 TFLs and 7 total sacks. How could I not mention Devin Witherspoon also? How could I not? A sack, 6 tackles, and 3 TFLs on runs that, if he does not get in the backfield and pursue DeAndre Swift, or even on screen passes as well, with the likes of Trey Brown also getting physical at the line of scrimmage and making sure that they do not gain a lot of yardage, if any at all, those contributions aren't made. It's the little things that make the difference in this ballgame. This could have been a completely different outcome if not for Devin Witherspoon and even Tariq Woolen managing to lock up for the most part on the back end to make the options limited for Caleb Williams, despite his ability to keep the ball away from the defense. He had no choice but to get conservative. You test him one time, he was going to pay for it. But now I get to the point where I have to offer a bit of a counter to that. Yes, both defenses played exceptionally well. But it almost seemed like at multiple points, both offenses self-sabotaged themselves. Why do I say that? Let me start out with the Seahawks. Their rushing yards in the first quarter ended up being the most that they had in the first quarter in the past 2 seasons as a rushing unit. They didn't want to keep that going. Why get away from that when it counted? Because they did settle on multiple occasions for pass after pass that was just not effective at all. They were extremely short, or Geno Smith would be sacked and the offense would get behind schedule. And then they would decide, weirdly enough, on multiple possessions to call runs on 3rd and long. Like that was going to be effective there. For you to have that many rushing yards in the first quarter and then only finish with 122 on the night just seems disappointing. Especially with the way the Bears were playing. If they weren't doing much of anything on offense, it comes down to ball control. And it comes down to your ability to control the line of scrimmage as well. And while technically on paper they outgained the Bears in every capacity, it feels like more could have been done there. They still lost the time of possession battle. Somehow. Some way. That should not happen in a game that you are potentially winning, I would say. It was very odd. And as for, well, I mean, as far as Geno Smith goes, at a certain point in this game, this man was averaging 2.1 yards per throw, air yards per throw, according to Next Gen Stats, as the broadcast team for Amazon detailed it. So if you're not going to run the football, you're going to get away from that, and you were relatively effective. Even with, yes, the fact that it was raining out there for a little bit. It was getting kind of crazy out there. For just a little bit of time, though. But for the entire game, you don't find it within yourself to stretch the field? DK Metcalf's catch of 23 yards was the longest completed pass on the night. And most certainly the longest completed pass in terms of air yardage, by far. There was just, that is just not a recipe for success exactly. You got to be able to take the top off the defense in some way. And Geno would just either hold on to the ball too long or just make irrational decisions. I mean, some of these plays, yes, it may look like a player's open, but he's being guarded. I get it. Especially on an earlier drive, you would have him throw a short pass to Jackson Smith and Jigbo on 3rd down when he was boxed up. He had his hands on the ball, so he could have reeled it down, but it was that contested to where it's like, why even make that decision in the first place? Then you had other passes that were literally getting players wide open. And you have Geno Smith directing his attention elsewhere in that moment, just completely affecting the outcome of the potential play. As far as the Bears go, they have to revamp their O-line. It'll begin through the draft. It has to. But they need to revamp their O-line. I mean, seriously. This man, Caleb Williams, is just inching closer and closer to being the most sacked quarterback in NFL history. And he can be another quarterback who holds on to the ball too long. But at the same time, there were many moments where plays were developing extremely well. And you would have them allowing rushers to get free. There is no way that a Hawks defense, who had struggled to get to Sam Darnold last week, was able to get all their mitts over Caleb Williams in this one. Possession in, possession out. DeAndre Swift would finish with 53 rushing yards on the ground, but they also need to figure that out as well. It's a mutual relationship with him and the O-line. Because if they're more effective, maybe they could create better running lanes for him to get through. But he also just got absolutely clamped up as well. Most of those yards came late. When it mattered, he was truly a non-factor in this one. To the point where they allowed Caleb Williams to get going on the ground himself, as he would finish with 37 rushing yards on the night on 5 carries. But things, along with penalties that would derail their possessions, all of that paled in comparison to this final possession in the fourth quarter. You would have Caleb Williams do his best to take full control of the game from here on out. They would get down after a Caleb Williams scramble for just a single yard, to 4th and 1. Now, at the time that Caleb Williams went down, there were about 2 minutes and 50 seconds left on the clock. You want to know when a timeout was called? With 2 minutes and 14 seconds left in the ballgame, about 40 precious seconds wasted. And it wasn't even Thomas Brown who called the timeout for the Bears. No, it was Seattle that called their timeout. Then, for whatever reason, instead of running a play right then and there, you would have a false start from their offensive linemen being undisciplined and just, frankly, not serviceable yet again in this game. So now you have 4th and long in your own territory, trying to keep your hopes of winning the game, potentially, or even tying it up, alive. And surely enough, with a throw across his body, Caleb Williams would manage to do just that before subsequently fumbling the snap on the very next play and taking a 5-yard sack, which was taken by Leonard Williams. You would have them get in another 3rd and long situation where he would find Rome Odunze for 15 yards, once more throwing across his body. And then they would allow yet another 30 seconds or so waste away after the Rome Odunze catch before Caleb Williams finally decided to throw a pass, which was a deep shot. They would call a timeout, and then on 2nd and 3rd down inside Seattle's 40-yard line, for whatever reason, they would throw up more deep shots instead of getting closer to field goal range. They had to settle for 4th and 10, where the Seahawks would call their timeout. But keep in mind, too, with this 4th down at Seattle's 40-yard line, it was decision time for the Bears. Do they trust enough in Cairo Santos to kick what would be about a 58-yard field goal, I want to say? Or do they want to go for it and try to get closer to his true range? They certainly did not trust Cairo Santos. And granted, I can't blame them. This is a person who infamously has one of the weaker legs you'll see out there. He does not have the pure strength to really get something like that to go. His longest field goal this season alone was from 54 yards out. But he has not been a proficient kicker from that range over the course of his entire career. So I don't necessarily blame them for not entrusting Cairo Santos to kick it from that deep. What I will say for blaming them is that you had 3 chances to get inside the 30 potentially and settle for a shorter field goal to get Cairo Santos completely in the zone. Instead, you just waste those possessions by throwing up incomplete pass after incomplete pass when you did not need it all in one play. This is not that kind of ball game for you to take those shots. You had to take what you were given, and you were given a lot of ground to work with as it pertained to the underneath. They were going to keep everything in front of them. You knew this, right? They were not going to let you go ahead and try to mount a touchdown drive. They're going to allow everything else to open up underneath. You take advantage of that as an offense. Don't try to test exactly what it is they're accounting for. Surely enough, on that fourth down, there would be a tremendous amount of pressure coming from the entirety of the Seahawks front seven before Caleb Williams threw up a pass of desperation. And on his 354th straight attempt, he would finally throw an interception, breaking the streak and preventing him from making potential history as the only rookie quarterback to reach the top 5 longest streaks in NFL history as it pertained to consecutive passes without an interception. He would stand at 353. The fifth longest streak in that regard would be at 354 consecutive passes. They ended it just in the nick of time with the help of Tariq Woolen, and that would seal up the game. Though, again, no scoring after the first half. Effectively sealed up after that. Again, Geno Smith had 160 yards passing, only threw 6 incompletions, but this is not a good game for him at all. There isn't much to write home about when it comes to receiving for either party, frankly. And that's exactly what it is. An ugly game in every sense of the imagination. But again, at this point, there was still a chance for the Seahawks to get in the playoffs. And yet, it felt as though it would just be odd to have them in the playoffs. If you're going to be a team that manages to blow a lead against the Vikings last week, but you score 24 points then manage to struggle to get in the end zone. In fact, not do it at all against a paltry Bears defense that gave up 34 points the week before. What is potentially going to happen to your team when you're seeing defenses like the Eagles defense, like as depleted as the Lions are, they cooked you offensively. You try to pull off those slow starts and those moments of self-sabotage off against those contending teams, you're going to have a hard time in postseason play against them. Certainly. There's no doubt about it. You would be in deep trouble. And I wouldn't be surprised. This would be the 10th straight loss for the Bears. And it would also be the lowest scoring game of the season. You have multiple people joking about this being the worst game they had ever seen in their lifetimes, which is just like either you're not watching a lot of football or you don't keep up with a lot of what's going on. There have certainly been worse games than this, but I guess if you're looking at it from a points perspective, yes, this is the worst game of the season. And again, you're trying to fight for a playoff spot. Being involved in something like that reflects very badly on your chances. But you do still have one to this point. Those chances would quickly diminish when it comes to the Saturday nightcap between the Cardinals and Rams. Now, I did not watch it in full, but I was certainly tracking it. Because if the Rams were to have lost this game against the Cardinals, it would have made things a hell of a lot easier for the matchup next week to at least make it the game for the division and a playoff berth, rather than having all of these outside factors contribute to a potential berth or not. But the Cardinals still decided to make things pretty interesting for a while, I guess. I mean, they had the Rams offense in a chokehold, and Matthew Stafford was on clamps for most of this game. But Kyler Murray was also on some shit. They had a chance to mount at least some points here, but decided to turn the ball over on downs inside the Rams' red zone. And then later on, they would go on a touchdown drive, capped off with a Kyren Williams run, before then settling for a field goal on their next possession after a couple of Pickett and McKee catches to bring them into the end of the first half with a 10-0 lead. The Cardinals would make haste on their first possession, take off a decent amount of time, and respond with a Trey McBride touchdown catch, his very first of the season. But Chad Ryland would miss a PAT because, of course, he did. They would then open up the fourth quarter with a field goal, despite taking 7 minutes and 19 seconds off the clock, getting inside the Rams' 10-yard line. They merely settled. Ridiculous. The Rams would then respond with a field goal of their own after more Pickett and McKee contributions and some help from Tyler Higbee also. The Cardinals would have 2 chances to tie or take the lead in the ballgame. I won't say tie. I mean, there's a 4-point lead there. You can't tie a game like that unless you manage to mount 2 consecutive safeties, which is difficult for any team to pull off. That's neither here nor there. Anyways, both of them were looking like promising drives. But Kyler Murray wanted to just revert to some very odd tendencies. And he would throw an interception on consecutive drives to close off the game. Now, the first one was just atrocious. He just chucked up a deep shot to Marvin Harrison Jr. in double coverage. And yes, Marvin Harrison Jr. could certainly make the catch. There's no doubt that he definitely has the ability to possess 50-50 catches. But I am saying that there's no reason to do that there. Settle for something shorter. Just pick up the first down. You don't need to be that desperate in that moment. I get that your season is done and you don't have much to play for necessarily, but you still have to be smart about this. And he would just completely overthrow this man, as Cameron Kinchins would come down with the catch. Now, the second possession is just so... what an ending to that. There's honestly no amount of blame I can really put on Kyler Murray there. It's a weird pass to begin with, but it got tipped up. And former 49er Ahkello Witherspoon would have to make a diving catch, barely scooping it off the ground and preventing it from touching the grass before securing it and getting the interception. And that would give the Rams the upper hand. It was what it was, but I'm certain that Seahawks fans were in a flux about that. It came down to that, and that is how the Rams would secure at least a better chance of gaining the division and gaining a playoff berth. it would only get worse from there. But let's just review some of the numbers here. Now, Kyler Murray would have 321 passing yards, but throw 2 interceptions, threw only a touchdown pass to win the Trey McBride. Michael Carter, the former Jet, would have 13 carries for 70 yards in this one. Trey McBride would have 12 receptions for 123 yards in the aforementioned touchdown catch, with Marvin Harrison Jr. adding 6 catches for 96 yards. No other receiver for them had over 25 yards receiving. Matthew Stafford, on the other hand, just 53.1% completion and 189 yards. Puka Nacua had most of the burn here. 10 receptions and 129 yards for him, with Cooper Kupp being the next most prolific receiver with only a 29-yard catch to show for it on just 3 targets. Again, not the best of games in this regard. Like, the Cardinals defense at least wanted to redeem themselves after the Panthers fiasco last week. They more than did their part. I don't know what the hell Kyler Murray was doing. Like, he could not have been in that much of a fucking rush to get on the Call of Duty. I suppose he's going to have all the time to make that happen. Because after next week, they're completely done. And they have a lot that they need to work on, quite frankly. That's neither here nor there. So let's move on to the next game that had implications here. Because with the Rams winning their matchup to secure the playoff berth and the division, they would need at least 2.5 teams out of the following: the Bills, the Vikings, the Browns, the Commanders, and the 49ers to win their respective games over the course of the Sunday and Monday night slate. The reverse effect would be true for the Seahawks. If they wanted to just stay alive, they would need at least 3 of those same teams to lose their game. So how would things shape up exactly? The Jets and the Bills would face off within the 1 p.m. time slot on Sunday. I will say that in the first half, the Jets defense actually did a pretty good job against a man who has logged 75 wins in his first 7 seasons, which was tied for the most with Russell Wilson coming into the game. They held more than their own in this one, despite allowing a touchdown on the very first possession of the game. James Cook and Mac Hollins would instantly start to carve up the defense before Dalton Kincaid got a solid catch and hit a little spin move as well to extend the play. It would get down to 1st and goal on the 1-yard line with the help of a Sauce Gardner PI, and Josh Allen would vulture it in for a touchdown. The Jets would need to respond, and desperately, if they wanted to keep pace with the Bills' offense, which is very difficult. They're tied, I believe, for their highest scoring average per game in franchise history, as the 2020 squad would log the same amount of points per game. It's a very difficult and dangerous game to play if you're any team, but you want to at least show that you are more than capable of putting points on the board. They would not do that at all. They would call a predictable dive play to Braylon Allen on 4th and short near Buffalo's red zone that would stall out. The Bills' offense was only held to a field goal in the second quarter, but the Jets were so fucking inept. Despite Garrett Wilson becoming the first New York Jet with at least 1,000 receiving yards in his first 3 seasons of play. You would have the Jets stall out, with Greg Rousseau continuing to place pressure on Aaron Rodgers. They would get down on this possession that saw them take up 62 yards inside Buffalo's 15-yard line before, for whatever reason, Aaron Rodgers decided to throw up a fuck it pass, and it was intercepted by Jordan Phillips, a D lineman for the Bills. Now, the Bills had punted on the possession before, and they would settle for one after as well. Too bad that A.J. Epinesa would crash in and force a safety. That field goal that I mentioned before would give the Bills a 12-0 lead to enter the third quarter. They would get Devontae Adams to open up the third quarter on a couple of productive catches, but ultimately stalling out. They had a chance to go for it on 4th and 5, and for whatever reason, decided to bluff them, or try to bluff them and settle for a delay of game for some reason, when you know at this point that you need to put possessions together. There's no reason you should be settling for that. They just laid down and gave up completely. Now, Garrett Wilson would continue to try his best to rally his team to victory. Greg Rousseau had other plans, as with a sack that he would get on 2nd and 15 inside Buffalo's 40 for the Jets, Aaron Rodgers would become the most sacked quarterback in NFL history, taking 566 over the course of his entire career, and surpassing Tom Brady. I'm not going to lie to you as well. That number seems suspicious. The fact that Tom Brady was sacked 565 times at least. Yes, he was not mobile at all. He was a statue. So if you could get enough pressure on him, you were more than set. But I fail to believe that a man who played 23 seasons in the league was sacked for an absurd amount of times in at least even one season. At the most, over the course of those years, he was probably around, I guess, league average when it came to overall sacks. Because, again, you had other seasons where he would just go mostly untouched by any defense. So do with that stat what you will. Nevertheless, the very play after that would see Aaron Rodgers throw another fuck it ball, and it led to a stupid interception caught by Christian Benford. Then the man has the gall when Benford gets out of bounds to go ahead and push him, drawing in a necessary roughness penalty. Well, okay, don't get mad at the fucking player. Don't fucking throw it to him in the first place. You wouldn't have that fucking problem. But Josh Allen would show Aaron Rodgers promptly how a fuck it ball is thrown. And this is where he would just start to fucking play games with the Jets defense. On 2nd and 13, this man would deliver a 30-yard fucking dime to Amari Cooper, and he just went up and got it completely. He mossed the shit out of this man. On the same possession, he, with a 9-yard catch to open up the drive, will become the 8th active player to reach 10,000 receiving yards. Then manages to make one of the better plays he's had this entire season. On your defensive back, Josh Allen would also be the only player with at least 50 passing touchdowns and 25 rushing or receiving touchdowns in a 2-season span, while also logging his 43rd game with at least a passing and rushing touchdown, which would be the second most behind Cam Newton with that touchdown pass, bringing the lead to 19-0, where the Jets would once more stall out again. This time, Von Miller wanted to get in on the action and sack Aaron Rodgers for an 8-yard loss. With the help of Cudrington, for whatever reason, he almost broke it loose as well. I'm not going to lie. He made a great move and then almost broke through the hole gracefully. But there was a penalty, and it was still a very short drive for the Bills. They only needed 37 yards to work with here. So automatically they get it out to Dalton Kincaid, and they draw the Jets defense into making some stupid decisions. They would end up at the 11-yard line after Michael Clemens would literally try to jump on the pile after the play was blown dead. Then they would get Quinnen Williams on an unnecessary roughness penalty. That made the process easier. The Bills, who would just run James Cook down their throats, bringing the lead to 26-0. Now, again, yes, Garrett Wilson was trying. I'll give him credit for that. But this was a stupid decision there. Garrett Wilson would try to improvise and try to extend the play, reverse field. Ed Oliver would manage to get him and then force a fumble on him, where Matt Milano would recover it, and for a second it looked as though he got a touchdown because it didn't seem like anybody touched him. But Aaron Rodgers barely managed to do it while Matt Milano was falling on the ball. So yet another short field for the Bills to work with could make this game get completely out of hand. Still, there's no excuse for what would happen on 3rd and 9. They would allow this man, Josh Allen, to scramble all the way to his right, set his feet, and throw up a ball all the way across the field, damn near, to the end zone, where both Ty Johnson and Keon Coleman were in the area. Despite the best efforts of a lurking Jets D-back, he was so far out of reach, and Keon Coleman was able to high point the ball, bringing the lead to 33-0. Now, on the possession before that, great play by Josh Allen, to be honest. They would set the franchise record for most TDs in a single season in team history, as they got 61. They would make that 62. And go into the fourth quarter with a 33-0 lead. That would just get worse from there as the Jets just continued to lay down and take it. The Bills are trying to show mercy, I guess. I mean, anytime you're going to put Mitch Trubisky in a football game, in this day and age, you know that your chances are slim to none in terms of being able to do much of anything about what the Bills have contributed to this ballgame. You have no chance. So the Bills are going to try to take it easy on you. maybe you can feel good about yourself by getting some quality stops and maybe mounting some possessions that end in touchdowns. I guess it started out relatively well as it forced Ray Davis to take multiple 2-yard losses on runs. But then we have Mitch Trubisky throwing it to a random ass nigga. I had no idea who the fuck Tyrell Shavers was before this play. Now this shows you just how bad the Jets really are. The fact that this man was able to step in and get what I would have to believe was his first NFL catch off of a screen and run all the way through your defense, through the middle of the field, hitting the nitrous and getting a 69-yard touchdown catch to give him what was likely his first NFL touchdown. And as far as the Bills go, he would be the 13th different player with a reception touchdown, which would be tied for the most in a single season in general. Absolutely ridiculous, man. The Jets would actually manage to mount a couple of touchdown drives, with Tyrod Taylor stepping in as Garrett Wilson would get one, and Tyler Conklin, for whatever fucking reason, would also get one. But to no avail. 40-14, though it was more like 40-0. But I guess from an optical lens, you have to try to make yourself look good here. There's nothing really good that does come from this, no matter how you try to slice it. I mean, I don't really see how that can happen for this team. This is Aaron Rodgers' first game, I believe, where they stated that he had under 200 yards passing and multiple interceptions, I believe. Or more like under 150. But either way, this was atrocious. There's no denying that at all. It was trash. Terrible. If you're going to be playing like this, then maybe his future as a Jet is truly in question. I mean, what the hell? Garrett Wilson would have 66 yards receiving on 7 catches and the aforementioned touchdown. There isn't much to write home about there, though. Josh Allen would have a routine game. I mean, 59.3% completion. That probably could have been a little better. But 182 yards and 3 total touchdowns. No interceptions. With, again, Mitch Trubisky also stepping in and throwing the aforementioned 69-yard touchdown pass. Amari Cooper would have 56 yards on 3 receptions and the aforementioned touchdown. Just keep that in mind. The random from out of absolutely nowhere can step in and lead the entire game. Not just the Bills squad. The entire game in receiving yards off one fucking catch. Pitiful. Absolutely embarrassing work. That's really just how it was. Now, the Bills were bound to beat the Jets anyways. I have no belief that the Jets would have managed to win at all in this one. But at the very least, you would want to see a fight. Still, they would need at least 2 more teams to do the same thing, the Rams. They would need at least 2 more, and one of them would happen to come up at the 4:25 slate, as the Vikings and Packers would face off. Now, this was bound to be a tough matchup. I guess this is a very interesting stat line here, that this game would see the most combined wins between NFC teams in history. It was certainly looking like a very difficult task for either team to really pull off, but I guess more so the Packers. You're going into Minnesota's house trying to pull things off. And I guess that they were feeling it early on. I mean, Jerry Tillery, for whatever reason, managed to get Josh Jacobs to fumble the ball. And the Vikings would get an easy possession to work with, but would merely settle for a punt. The Packers would do the same thing before the Vikings would start to drive down just a little bit with the help of T.J. Hockenson, because, of course. Darnold would then throw up a deep shot to Jordan Addison, but Keyshawn Nixon did a good job of using his recovery speed in locating the ball, getting his hands up, and deflecting it out of Jordan Addison's hands. Because if he did not make those adjustments, that could have been a huge loss. Will Riker would ultimately have to settle for a 57-yard field goal, and he would miss it. The Packers would get Josh Jacobs going yet again, and ultimately on 4th and goal from Minnesota's 4-yard line. Brandon McManus would get a chip shot field goal to go in, giving the Packers a 3-0 field goal to get into the second quarter. From here, it would be mostly Vikings, in no shortage of the concept. Aaron Jones would be doing his absolute best to get his revenge, but he would be flipped on his head by yet another person seeking revenge, and former Viking and current Packer Eric Wilson. He was toting the rock a little bit before Jalen Naylor and Jordan Addison would see a couple targets. Ultimately, the man on the possession that would close things out for them here would be none other than Jalen Naylor. He would run an excellent route, getting him into the end zone, as Sam Darnold would throw a dart his way from 31 yards out, making the game a 7-3 one. The Packers would get some help with Byron Murphy committing pass interference, but they would still settle for just very short play calls. And they would go for it again on 4th and 2, this time near Minnesota's red zone, where Jaden Reed would not catch the target from Jordan Love. As he wanted to get it all in one play instead of settling for something short, they give the Vikings the ball back yet again. Packers defense does a good job of hanging in there, though, despite Jalen Naylor getting a catch to get them closer to Green Bay's red zone. Will Riker would ultimately settle for another field goal. The Packers would settle for yet another punt, which could have been disastrous, but Brandon Powell managed to recover his own muff. Credit to the Packers defense, though, at least as far as the first half goes. I mean, even with a T.J. Hockenson 28-yard catch to open up the possession and another 12-yard catch to get them closer to field goal range, the mere fact of the matter is they ultimately had to settle for a field goal. The game was only a 13-3 ball game. It seemed like the Packers weren't doing much of anything, but there was still a fighting chance for them to respond with points and make this as competitive as possible. Justin Jefferson was also held completely in check, because for a while there, he only had a single catch for 6 yards. He was not doing much of anything to start out this game. That would change quickly. He would be targeted 3 times on this possession to open up the third quarter and catch them all. But it would be Jordan Addison with another dime of a pass from Sam Darnold, who would get in from 18 yards out to open up the game by 17 in favor of the Vikings. The Packers would merely punt the ball again. Carrington Valentine, though, would have other plans for the Vikings overall. He was sick and tired of getting exposed like this. So, Carrington Valentine would get the interception before Jalen Nailor, for whatever reason, decided to activate his Marquez Colston and force a fumble on the same play. Now, Carl Brooks would manage to fall on it, but Carrington Valentine in that moment has to just be smarter with the football, I guess. The Packers would get a sign of life abusing Josh Jacobs and getting him in the end zone from 2 yards out. Typical Josh Jacobs sequence there. The Vikings would get right back on it, though, with the help of Jordan Addison and Cameron Akers for some reason. Now, the lead got as large as 17, and it could have been as large as 20. I mean, Justin Jefferson would open up the drive with a 37-yard catch, yet another 20-plus yarder for him, before Will Reichert would miss a 43-yarder. The Packers would get a couple of touchdown drives together, though you could say that this was in garbage time, as Emmanuel Wilson would get in for one after multiple contributions from Tucker Kraft and also Bo Melton, a former Seahawk. Shout out to Bo Melton. Romeo Doubs would also see a lot of action on this next possession, and it would be Malik Heath to finish off this next Packers drive. All the Vikings had to really do, though, was close out the game, which they would do on a fake that would see Cameron Akers run out into the flat and have to adjust back to the ball, stumbling over, but getting it for a 6-yard catch. That would be the end of the ball game. The Vikings would win 27-25. Though the score, again, is very misleading. They had full control of this game for a while. 35 minutes and 30 seconds of time of possession. They averaged 6.3 yards a play. They converted a good amount of their third down attempts. And they didn't lose the turnover margin. It was even. Jordan Love would have 185 yards passing with a touchdown and 63.3% completion. This was a colder game for Josh Jacobs, though. I mean, 69 yards and a touchdown run on the ground. But he did not catch a single pass, which would have likely happened. It certainly was the case against the Saints. They liked to utilize him in the receiving game. They did not target him a single time in this one. So I found that pretty interesting. As for the Vikings, Sam Darnold would have 377 passing yards and 76.7% completion with 3 passing touchdowns and an interception. Justin Jefferson would finish the game with 8 receptions for 92 yards. Jalen Nailor would have 5 receptions for 81 yards and an aforementioned touchdown. Jordan Addison would have 6 receptions for 69 yards and an aforementioned touchdown. And TJ Hawkinson would have 5 receptions for 68 yards and an aforementioned touchdown. There were multiple historical milestones set by the Vikings in this one. For example, they would win with this game. They would increase their streak to 58 straight wins at home when leading by 10 or more points entering the fourth quarter. It remains second to the Patriots between 2001 and 2016, who had 92 such wins. Kevin O'Connell would also have the second best record when it comes to one-score games amongst head coaches who have logged at least 25 such games in their career. And especially as it pertains to the names on the list, he is second in terms of efficiency, but with 26 wins in this category, he now has the most amongst that top 4. So that's pretty fucking good. And he has done a tremendous job. Still, they are very much... There is a very even chance that even with a team like the Vikings finishing 14-2 as far as this point goes, and potentially finishing with 14 wins if things go a certain way, in any other season, that would be a number 1 seed in a conference. And that may not happen. We'll get to that in a second. The next game that had implications would come down to some Sunday night action. All the team needed, the Los Angeles squad needed, was just one more game won by at least another team out of this bunch, and they would get in. They noted, too, that Sean McVay's ass was watching the game. But this is honestly a very good showdown between Michael Penix Jr. and Jayden Daniels, the dueling rookie quarterbacks who had historic seasons in their respective teams last season in college football. Things would start out rougher, apparently, for Michael Penix Jr. as an interception was thrown, but I can't necessarily put that on him. Not even necessarily being biased in any sense of the word. That's just not the case. When you look at it, the receiver just ran the wrong route completely. He was supposed to run over to the corner, so Penix Jr. naturally was expecting that. And that did not happen. The receiver deviated from the plan, and Penix would throw up what looked to be an errant pass, but ultimately it was just miscommunication. There's not much you can do about it. The Commanders would drive down for a touchdown in which they just completely, completely abused Olamide Zaccheaus, former Falcon, by the way. For whatever reason, he just decides to circle the Eagles game last week and then the Falcons game this week on the fucking calendar as if he's gonna go all crazy. And surely enough, he manages to do so. While, if you're the Eagles or the Falcons for this particular game, why the hell are you seeking revenge? You were not good, not productive with either one of these teams. And you feel emboldened enough to want to step up your game against them? It's just crazy. But he would get the touchdown from 7 yards out to give them a 7-0 lead. Kyle Pitts would get a 23-yard catch on the next possession for the Falcons. Surprisingly, he didn't drop it. And after another solid pair of throws by Michael Penix Jr., it was Bijan Robinson time. He would get in from 1 yard out for a touchdown run to tie up the ball game. Things got very, very, very weird on this next Commanders possession. They would be in a 2nd and 10 situation where Jayden Daniels was trying to drop back for a pass. And I believe it's J.D. Bertrand was able to get back in there and sack him deep in Washington territory. But not in the midst of some absolute madness. As he was trying to sack him, I kid you not, this man, Jayden Daniels, had his body fold completely backwards, nearly in half. And his leg almost got caught up in the worst of ways under the trailing Bertrand. It could have been a very bad injury. Luckily, Jaden Daniels is able to get up and move back around. But let me tell you something. No person's body should be bending like that. That was unsightly. And you certainly don't need your franchise quarterback succumbing to something like that. Now, I don't know what it's going to take, but me personally, Jaden Daniels will have to very much improve his physique over the course of the next few years. Because granted, he's not the biggest individual, and I'm not saying that he should become one. But you got to get a lot more protein, a lot more meat in general in your system to work out and allow it to eventually become muscle. Or just become some form of padding to shield you from shit like that. Because all it took was for Bertrand to hit him in the right area, and Jaden Daniels could have been out of there. Gone from the game completely. No one should be having their body control like that. That is not real at all. They would punt from there later on, and the Falcons would be on the same thing. Jaden Daniels would have another shot at it. And ultimately, Terry McLaurin would get what would be, by the end of the game, his only catch of the game for 5 yards. Which is just strange, bro. Like, there's no shots. I mean, that is unreal. And he was targeted 7 times. I don't know whether it was just him not being able to reel in catches, whether it was Jaden Daniels missing him completely, or A.J. Terrell Jr. just locking his ass down. Whatever it was, he would not get anything else going from there. So now other players had to step up. And they were trying to get it to go. You would have Jamison Crowder seeing more action, and Olamide Zaccheaus seeing more action as well. But Caden Ellis for the Falcons, who I believe is an edge rusher, would actually drop back in coverage and manage to lurk Jaden Daniels over the middle on a play in which he was actually looking for Jamison Crowder, who would subsequently tackle him. The Falcons would continue to try to put points on the board from there, starting out with Tyler Allgeier getting some action in. Michael Penix Jr. would throw the one pass to Drake London for 14 yards, and then draw a penalty on another. But it was the Bijan Robinson show from here on out. He was rendered just short of the end zone on 2nd and 2 from Washington's 4-yard line, but within a couple more plays, after Michael Penix Jr. tried to scramble, well, run it in on a QB sneak, rather, Bijan Robinson would get in for another 1-yard touchdown. You just merely delayed the inevitable by doing that. Now, with that overall drive, Bijan Robinson, over the course of the entire season, would have the most rushing yards in a single season for a Falcon running back since Michael Turner, with his 1,340 in 2013. They would display that on a graphic shortly thereafter, which would actually open up the Commanders' possession, where once again Matthew Judon would show his pass rushing prowess and get Jaden Daniels in the backfield for a sack. The Falcons would then go on a field goal drive, but controversy would happen here as well. You know how Thomas Brown managed to, on multiple drives in the fourth quarter alone, or on multiple sequences in the fourth quarter alone, let valuable seconds run off the clock instead of taking timeouts. Yeah, Raheem Morris did the same shit. They had all 3 of their timeouts, and yet after a Darnell Mooney catch from 12 yards out with about 40 3 seconds or so left in the game, you would have them call a play with 22 seconds left. Why not call a timeout in that point and save yourself some energy to work with? You had 24 yards to work with. 1st and 10. I know that a difference about 21 seconds doesn't seem like a lot. Every second matters in a football game, especially in this case. And to have potentially come out of this possession with a touchdown could have altered the course of the game for y'all. But instead, they had to settle for a Riley Patterson field goal. The Falcons would completely own the second half. I'll just say it like that. They would completely take control in the second half. Their first drive would see them take up 7 minutes and 47 seconds off the clock in 69 yards for a touchdown by Zach Ertz from 10 yards out. Bijan Robinson will also have another graphic that showed that his 11 games with over 100 or more rushing yards would be the most since work done in 2005. And he had also forced the most missed tackles in the league this season alone. That would be of no avail here. The Commanders' defense did their best effort to hold him in check, and as soon as they ultimately got off the play script, things went terribly bad for them, as Dante Fowler was able to force a sack fumble and Michael Penix Jr. would then recover it, and the Falcons would have to punt again. Jaden Daniels would do everything in his power to give the Commanders the lead here. On multiple occasions, he scrambled on broken plays before settling for some short passes, and Chris Rodriguez, after the Jaden Daniels experience, would get involved on 4 straight carries and score from 2 yards out to give them a 21-17 lead. The Falcons would stall out yet again before Jaden Daniels would have no other choice but to settle for a field goal, as Olamide Zaccheaus would have scored a 2-yard touchdown if not for Sam Cosmi holding on the play. Zane Gonzalez would kick a field goal to give them a 24-point lead, and now it was Michael Penix Jr.'s time in the clutch to deliver a drive to keep at least potential fight in the NFC South alive, and also derail the Commanders' chances of clinching a playoff berth on the spot. So, what was Michael Penix Jr. going to do? He tightened up. When he had to have it on multiple plays, he made the necessary read time and again, especially to Drake London early on. The same person that got a 14-yard catch on 3rd and 5 would manage to get a 31-yard catch with an elite double move on 4th and 11 from midfield. Also, the play calling was seemingly against them too, because on 1st and goal from their 5-yard line after a Ray McCloud 14-yard run, you would think that all the Falcons would need to do is just run the football a little bit. But instead, they called a direct snap to Bijan Robinson, who lost the snap and would pick it back up at the 27-yard line. If every yard counts and every second counts, certainly an unwise decision to make, to say the least. To say the least, man. But when it came down to it, on both 2nd and 4th down, Penix Jr. would make multiple 13-yard pass completions, one to Drake London, and the ultimate one, which was a perfect way to thread the needle in between a tight window to Kyle Pitts for the touchdown to tie up the ball game. As much as people were clamoring for the Falcons to go for two and take control of the game, it was wisest for them to settle for the PAT. Especially with what they were able to do. They were able to sack Jaden Daniels on first down and force him into back-to-back incomplete passes, with the latter being a drop by Olamide Zaccheaus. It's a perfect situation if you're a defense. They retained a couple of their timeouts. They had 55 plus seconds to work with. They just mounted a drive that saw them get all the way down the field. There's a good chance that they could get down there again and settle for a field goal. Ball was in their court. And with a Darnell Mooney 25-yard catch, it looked as though they were in the driver's seat before yet again Raheem Morris decided to let another possession come down to wasting multiple seconds after a pretty good play. Their next play was called with 19 seconds left without them taking any timeout. Michael Penix Jr. would then throw another incomplete pass. And then, with the help of both Deron Payne and Michael Davis, they would draw penalties that would get Riley Patterson closer. But still, even that came with just 2 seconds left on the clock. Imagine if you call a timeout or so, automatically after the Darnell Mooney catch here, you could have had at least, I would say, around 15 to 16 extra seconds to run another play and get closer into better range for Riley Patterson. He is another kicker. Like, this is literally the rinse and repeat story from the fucking Bears game with the script that Thomas Brown had. Riley Patterson is another kicker who is infamous for having a weak leg. He does not necessarily have the boot to kick it from 56 yards out like the Falcons would have to ultimately settle for. His longest field goal made in the game was just 39 yards. This is a man that had not seen any action, a lot of action this season. But let's just put it like this, shall we? We go back to last season. His longest field goal was 52 yards. Back in 2022, his longest field goal was 53. And back in 2021, his first season in the league, his longest field goal was 49. He has been another kicker who has been known to be inaccurate from 50-plus yards out. And they have no choice now because you let all that time waste away. With 2 seconds left, you have to settle for a field goal. And ultimately, the 56-yarder from Riley Patterson would come up just short. The Commanders, akin to what they were doing in the second half, completely controlled the overtime possession. Penix Jr. never saw the ball. A 7-minute, 18-second drive with Jaden Daniels trying his hardest to secure the playoff berth. He would not go down without a fight. Literally, you would get him scrambling for multiple yards and then delivering passes to Chris Rodriguez Jr., who would then hurdle over Mike Hughes before Brian Robinson Jr. would get involved. Jaden Daniels was going to put it all on his shoulders, literally. This 6-yard run from him was absolutely crazy. If Justin Simmons did not hit him in the way that he did, he would have scored right then and there. I mean, literally, he was fighting off defenders, trying his hardest to get in the end zone. But it seemed as though he got the wind knocked out of him, and the Commanders would merely settle for a timeout. You would then have Zach Ertz with the game on the line, and with a couple of teams' seasons on the line, make an exceptional catch. It was a low pass from Jaden Daniels, and he got his hands just under it to win the Commanders the football game 30-24 in overtime, giving them a playoff berth, giving the Rams the division and the playoff berth, and knocking out the Seattle Seahawks from a chance to play in the postseason this year. Crazy ending. Again, I know that a lot of Seahawks fans were watching it too and were certainly just reeling from this. They will have PTSD about the diving interception from Witherspoon in the Rams game and this catch in this a great game. Again, no doubt about that. I'm not going to dispel that notion. This was an exceptional game. But, jeez, man. Michael Penix Jr. will have 223 yards passing and threw his first NFL touchdown pass while throwing an interception as well. Bijan Robinson would have 90 rushing yards on 17 carries and 2 touchdowns. Drake London would have 7 receptions for 106 yards. And Kyle Pitts would have 4 receptions for 44 yards and the aforementioned then game-tying touchdown. Jaden Daniels, on the other hand, would have 227 yards passing with 66.7% completion, 3 passing touchdowns, and an interception, while also leading the team in rushing yards with 127 yards on 16 carries. Not only was he the third player to finish with at least 3,500 passing yards and at least 800 plus rushing yards in a season, but he would also become the most prolific rusher as a rookie quarterback, breaking Robert Griffin III's single-season record of rushing yards as a rookie in 2012. Complete and total credit to Jaden Daniels, and they deserve to clinch this playoff berth after such tremendous contribution from him. There's no doubt about it. He has turned things around for them completely. I don't know how much of a run they can go on, but they've got a fighting chance with him under center. That's truthful. Olamide Zaccheaus in his revenge game would lead all Commanders receivers with 85 yards on 8 receptions and a touchdown catch, with Zach Ertz also having 72 yards and 2 touchdown catches on 6 receptions. Still absurd to believe that Terry McLaurin had just 5 yards catching. That is wild to me. But that'll break it. That'll be it for that trajectory. I will now take the time out to go back to the Christmas Day action. And to be honest, with how things shaped up to be, there is probably a better angle for me to go and discuss those in conjunction with one another. To be completely honest, I'll do the duty of sorting out the chapters for this specific session, but we'll start out with the Chiefs and Steelers. This is now 3 straight losses against playoff level contenders, Super Bowl level contenders in the Eagles, the Ravens, and now the Chiefs. there are definitely tons of analysts out there, and some have already said this about the Steelers. They are paper tigers. Because it's not just the way, it's not just the fact that they have dropped all 3 of these games against teams who are in the playoffs right now and are potentially Super Bowl bound in the right context. But it's the way that you're losing these games. You let the Eagles waste away the remaining 10 minutes of the ball game against you in that game. You threw a game-losing pick 6. Next one, and lost by double digits. And in this Chiefs game, you just allow more of the same. Now, the Chiefs are going to be the Chiefs, and they're going to do their usual magic man shit. And there is no way that a man like Patrick Mahomes should be able to make a fucking pass, a shovel pass, to Samaje Perine from 14 yards out to convert for a first down. There is no way that they should be able to get away with a phantom catch from Hollywood Brown. Like, of course the Chiefs are going to get away with a couple things here and there. The game is still relatively in your control. A 49-yard catch allowed by Dante Jackson to Justin Watson there. A Justin Watson touchdown. Within just a few plays of that, an interception thrown by Russell Wilson over the middle to Justin Reed for whatever fucking reason. And then you get some, good plays here and there, like a scramble touchdown from Russell Wilson. But just multiple possessions you're getting in Chiefs territory or near midfield with good contributions from the likes of Jaylen Warren as well. And then you're sabotaging yourself with stupid penalties and just bad decision making. Not to mention allowing the Chiefs offense to just completely control the line of scrimmage. They're taking up chunks of time off these possessions with their typical brand of football. Their rushing touchdown by Kareem Hunt to get the game to a 22-10 score open up the fourth quarter. And then you allow them to compound on that momentum as Pat Freiermuth would fumble. And Trent McDuffie would force it before it was recovered by Nick Bolton, leading to a touchdown in which Travis Kelce was able to coast wide open in the seam, past everybody. This man, Travis Kelce, with that specific touchdown, would actually become the Chiefs' all-time leader in touchdown receptions, passing Tony Gonzalez up. He would also, over the course of the game, become yet another player in NFL history to reach 1,000 career receptions. A great day for him. Mahomes on the day would also manage to go on and become the most prolific passer in terms of passing touchdowns through their first 8 seasons, surpassing Peyton Manning, not Eli. Meanwhile, the Steelers just continue to struggle with the same shit. It's the same story every time, it seems. And it seemed like for a while they were doing better, but just could not get out of their own way. I mean, you have an older Russell Wilson contributing 55 yards on the ground. Your team overall combines for 202 rushing yards. And Jaylen Warren, I don't care what anybody says. After this game, Jaylen Warren is the number 1 running back in Pittsburgh. A combined 16 touches for 112 yards for him on the day. He was the spark that allowed the Steelers to keep going on some of these possessions. Do not be fooled by Najee Harris's stat line. At a specific point in this game, very late in the game too, he had just 7 rushes for 21 fucking yards. 3 yards a carry? In this climate, against a 2-time reigning Super Bowl champion in the Chiefs. And this was without Chris Jones, who I didn't even know was hurt. I didn't know that this man wasn't playing, and yet you couldn't even tell. They were getting pressure at will and clogging up the rushing lane specifically for Najee Harris. How is it that Jaylen Warren, a smaller back, could get through these rushing lanes more effectively than a fucking dude that stands at 6'4" and 230 plus? Like he is, like I've said time and again, poor man's, taller man's Trent Richardson, bro. There's no other way around it. How are you blessed with that size and you don't know how to use it? It seems like even then, you'll use it at times, but it also manages to take away your ability to make nimble movement. That makes no fucking sense. And it certainly cost them here. The Chiefs, on the other hand, just had 69 yards rushing, but 320 yards passing from Mahomes with 76.3% completion from the field and 3 touchdown passes, with Travis Kelce leading the way with 84 receiving yards and an aforementioned touchdown on 8 catches. Xavier Worthy had 10 total touches for 89 total yards and a touchdown, with Justin Watson adding 60 yards and the touchdown. I'm not even familiar with like some of these players at times, but I mean, here we are. You have the Chiefs getting yet another dominant win. Honestly, it's been a while. Yet another one, I say that like they've been doing this consistently. No. This is their largest margin of victory in quite a few games, if I do say so myself. They'll take this and run with this. But you, as a Pittsburgh team that is trying to get into the playoffs themselves, you may have very well given the Chiefs the confidence on the offensive side of the ball that they need to start mounting victories in this specific postseason. As much as they have been a cardiac team, just escaping with victory after victory this season, you don't want them to start becoming a team that dominates you at will in playoff football at this point in time. You let them get into that point, it is over for everyone else in the league. The Ravens, though, have something to say about that. If Lamar Jackson is not solidifying his case enough, I don't know what else he needs to do. I really don't. It does help that Derrick Henry went off in this game as well. Sure. But you have this dude delivering dime after dime to Mark Andrews, who managed to skate down the field for 67 yards somehow. You have him making Danielle Hunter look like a casual NFL player. He completely froze the man, standing on the side, well, near the sideline, near the boundary, and delivering a throw across his body to a wide open Isaiah Likely in the end zone, with him turning away like it's fucking Stephen Curry hoisting up 30-foot no-look jumpers in the fucking NBA. Then later on in the game, the man decides to take it upon himself and show every fucking body that he can still run the ball effectively, running with his highest miles per hour in his career on a 48-yard scamper for a touchdown that not only increased the lead to 22, but gave him the NFL record for rushing yards by a quarterback in a career, breaking Michael Vick's previous record by just a single yard. And with that being the case, with him only being 27, he's bound to completely do away with that previous record and overly exceed it at this point. The Ravens would then do their deed by putting up their final scoring drive of the game, getting another touchdown pass to Mark Andrews, who reached 50 as a Raven. The first player to do so for their franchise. Absolutely ridiculous work. He is probably the leading candidate. He should be. There's no way about it. If a man like Josh Allen can get dominated by this same Ravens team earlier in the season, and then directly after that struggle against this Texans defense, who again, yes, this is a horrible look for them. They are one of the top defenses in the league. And they clamped the hell out of Josh Allen, giving him the worst game of probably his career. But he can manage to somehow still be in the MVP race, that's fine. But if you mean to tell me that against this same defense, it's no struggle for Lamar Jackson at all to do what he did with relatively less volume. He only attempted 15 passes. He only ran the ball 4 times and combined for 255 total yards by himself to go along with 3 total touchdowns. It was easy out. He had to do nothing to get to that point. Meanwhile, we just detailed Josh Allen's performance against a trash Jets team. So you mean to tell me you needed to throw 27 passes and run the ball 5 times, I believe, to not even reach 200 total yards from scrimmage, and put up the same amount of total touchdowns, but against a weaker defense at this point, a weekend defense at this point, and a team that's relatively unmotivated right now with the Jets. That's a completely different story in and of itself. But this Texans team also, CJ Stroud played like dog shit. I can't even lie to you. Yes, Ohio State man all the way. There's nothing but support from this side, but he had a horrible game. The Ravens defense, with the help of Kyle Van Noy having a resurgent season, and Jason Oweh being able to generate sacks for some reason, made life a living hell for him back there. And even then, he was not getting sacked, or when his O-line was not succumbing to pressure, it was his own fault for either holding the ball too long or missing some routine passes that we, as fans and as other pundits, would know that he is capable of making. There were multiple overthrows from him. Granted, he's good for at least a couple of games. He was doing this same stuff at Ohio State. That's a given. But some of them were absolutely ridiculous. And just having one by itself doesn't mean much of anything. But when you're getting 3 or 4 of them at a time over the course of a string of possessions, you cost yourself the game that way. And the offense literally did not do anything. They had a chance as they would drive down the field to the Ravens' red zone and actually get in goal-to-goal territory on their 4-yard line, but would stall out completely with the help of Darius Washington and Tre'Davious White forcing Joe Mixon out of bounds on 4th and goal, just short of a chance to put up their only offensive touchdown of the game. Texans offense contributed jack shit. The highlight play for them was literally Kamari Lassiter, a rookie, being able to time the play up so well and stuff Derrick Henry in the backfield for a safety. The only points they would put up in this game. Meanwhile, you have the likes of, I don't know who this guy was. I think it was Murray for the fucking Texans. This man had the gall after the first fucking run. Yes, Eric Murray. Nigga had the gall from the first fucking run to try and celebrate after tackling Derrick Henry. Let's just say that within just a few short minutes, his ass was lying ass backwards on the fucking ground after taking a fucking lick from Derrick Henry. That shit was no fun anymore. And then before the game, you have Josh Johnson and Joe Mixon for some fucking reason getting into it. Like, what? I don't know where the shit even came from, how those two even collided, but there's no way. Like, I'm looking at it from Joe Mixon's side. It's like there's no way you're doing that as a starting caliber and highly productive quarterback for a playoff caliber team. Josh Johnson's on the better team. This nigga is a career journeyman and the second stringer. How are you getting into a beef with this guy? I have no idea. Josh Johnson would get the last fucking laugh as he would deliver an absolute dime to former Texan Anthony Miller later in the game. And then you would have Joe Mixon, of all people, get into this situation and then go out and put up just 39 total yards on 11 total carries. Absolutely boxed up. Just 2.9 yards rush. There is no way. That just, like, instant karma at that point. How are you going to do that and then go out on the field and put up empty numbers? That's embarrassing. And that's literally what this was. Embarrassing. 2 points on to a national audience, rather. In front of a national audience with basically an entire world, or a good portion of the world, watching you play on Christmas for whatever reason, and also a subsequent concert with some famous woman. Like, there's just no shot you did this. And during said concert, the McNair family had the nerve to appear in a fucking car driving across the field as your team is getting blown out by 15 points at halftime. Now, Lamar Jackson was quoted as saying that he was going to try and watch the concert, and even his ass didn't go out there despite them having a lead. I get it. It's different as a player. You're trying to work through a potential game plan to go ahead and just continue to put this thing away. I completely understand it. But you're going to have that and then have the owners of this team go out there at this time? Like, how tone deaf can you be? This is not the time for you to try to promote your brand. You are getting dog walked right now. And you decide to do that. The absolute nerve of them. And it just continued from there. Stroud would have 185 yards passing and an interception on 54.8% completion. Horrid number there. Nico Collins would lead all receivers, but even then, it's not like he could do much of anything with it. Derrick Henry again, 147 yards on the ground for him, and a touchdown on 27 carries, giving him yet another game with over 100 yards rushing, and yet another game with a rushing touchdown this season, continuing some personal streaks of his, and continuing to etch his name in the history books. Ravens receivers did not have to do a lot of work in this one either, and I can't blame them. When you can combine for 43 rushes and 251 yards on the ground as a team, while averaging almost 6 yards a carry, you don't need to pass the fucking ball. And they were still able to do this damage to them. So again, that's how the Christmas Day action went. As far as viewership goes, both games averaged 24 million viewers across both games. As I mentioned in the last one, NBA only had 5 million on average. Pales in comparison to the National Football League. But I'll tell you what, both of the games were fucking duds. If you can have a team get blown out by 19 points and then by 29 points, with an entire team's offense not managing to score at all. So they'll have to figure that out. And as far as the actual presentation goes on Netflix, in terms of the view of the broadcast itself, it was not necessarily the worst, though there were multiple bugs at multiple points, but nothing much that affected the actual experience of watching the game. They had a stacked roster. They would get different broadcasters and commentators from NFL Network, from ESPN, from CBS, from Fox. Greg Olsen was there. And also, Robert Griffin III was there for some reason doing the absolute craziest shit. The shit that he did has probably been making the waves at this point already. So I don't even need to bring attention to that here. When it comes to idea, as I've said before, not a fan of it. I mean, yes, Netflix is taking over Blockbuster at this point. There's literally just one more Blockbuster in the entire world left, and that's in a small city in fucking Oregon. They have taken over the game, and they have become one of the biggest streaming services over the years. There's no denying that. Maybe it was inevitable to have a major league strike a deal with them. Maybe it was. And maybe a good amount of people at this point, with it being such a big service, have access to it. But my belief is that not everybody does. And yes, while 48 million viewers total, not to mention when you're talking about concurrent viewers, that number is probably a little higher. 48 million seems like a lot. There's still a good amount of people that you're just not accounting for. And if not everybody can have that access to it, unless you get behind a fucking paywall for it, like not everybody has the money to go ahead and accept the notion of subscribing to a paywall. Like, it's just a very flawed system. And it's not something that everybody can get behind. So I'm not the biggest fan of it. But with the numbers not lying and with that profit reigning in, they will probably try to run this back. Maybe next year. They just need to figure out a way to get some better games on. I mean, again, granted, Chiefs and Steelers, Ravens, Texans sound like compelling matchups, but not everybody brought their A game. I guess you can't really anticipate it. But again, just not necessarily too high on it. I will not lie about that. But let's move on to a better game. This time on Saturday for the 4 p.m. slot on NFL Network between the Broncos and the Bengals. In no way did I expect a matchup between Bo Nix and Joe Burrow to be as competitive as it was. I mean, you had Bo Nix rolling out, doing similar shit with short pass after screen pass to running backs and Marvin Mims Jr. alike, before he actually managed to hit Davon Vele on a pretty solid route for 16 yards. They would ultimately settle inside Cincinnati's 2-yard line for a field goal. The Bengals did themselves no favors when, after a couple catches from Mike Gesicki, they decided to do a predictable run play on 4th and short. They got stuffed immediately by Nick Benito. Once again, I don't even need to say it anymore. Now, they had a chart that I looked at and saw for, top 10 players at each position. He seems to be firmly in place to be a Pro Bowler, according to that chart. So, good work on people for actually recognizing, for once, what he has been able to do. The Bengals defense would step it up a little bit, and they, to their credit, as far as the first half went, they did well. I won't deny that. He was able to, with that, Joe Burrow, get in some absolute dimes to Mike Gesicki, despite getting absolutely lit the fuck up. It just endanger that every time with just how porous this O-line truly is. Tee Higgins would also get involved a lot, and just keep that in mind. Ultimately, they would drive all the way down and be in a go-to-go situation. They would try to run it to no avail. And then Jamar Chase, for whatever reason, would drop a 2-yard out route. very surprised about that one. The Triple Crown, potential Triple Crown winner, leading the league in receiving in all categories, all 3 major categories, drops that. Pretty wild stuff to think about. I'm not going to lie. And then Jonathan Cooper, as Joe Burrow was trying to extend the play on that subsequent 4th down, would come from behind and absolutely wreck this man into oblivion. Bengals remain scoreless. Once more, the Bengals defense would hold again, as they would be forced to punt again. On a drive that they had to have, the Bengals would only need to get down the field and just finally put points on the board for once, which they were able to do with the help of none other than Andre Yoshivas, and then the likes of Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase coming together to collectively close out the drive, with Tee Higgins reeling in the touchdown catch from 2 yards out to give them a 7-3 lead at the end of the half. The Bengals would get the ball back and try to extend their lead. They would do it. They would probably have wanted a touchdown out of it after taking 5 minutes and 53 seconds off the clock, and getting good plays once more to Tee Higgins for 15 and Andre Yosivas over the middle of the field for 26. But they would once more have to settle after pressure would continue to rein in for the Broncos defense. And Kate York would have to kick another field goal. 10-3 ball game. The Broncos got a little lucky as Marvin Mims Jr. would fumble a pass on 3rd and 2 after gaining 8 yards. Now, Marvin Mims Jr. would have it go out of bounds. That kept their drive alive. And Cortland Sutton, later on in that possession, on 2nd and goal from the 6, would rein in a beautiful pass from Bo Nix, if I do say so myself. Still very short. But I think the fortunes in that changed for Bo Nix just a little bit. A little bit of foreshadowing there. Jonathan Cooper, former Ohio State man, would once more get the better of Joe Burrow after a couple of positive plays. But they would storm back a little bit with the help of Jamar Chase and Chase Brown, getting them closer inside the Broncos' red zone, where Tee Higgins would yet again make his mark, this time getting a touchdown from 12 yards out to get his 2nd one on the day and open up the lead 17-10. More of the same from the Broncos offense, with run after short pass, until Bo Nix finally recognized that he has a stronger arm than most people have been led to believe. He unloaded a fucking heater. A heater to Marvin Mims Jr. from 51 yards out for a touchdown to tie up the ball game. It was looking real good for the Broncos for just a second as well, as they would inevitably force a fumble on Tee Higgins, with Patrick Surtain recovering it. Too bad that Bo Nix is still a rookie and he's bound to make rookie mistakes. He would throw a pick right into the hands of Jermaine Pratt on the subsequent possession to give the Bengals a chance to close out the ball game. They would, with the help of Jamar Chase getting a 38-yard catch and then an 11-yard catch, get into a 1st and goal on the 6-yard line. I thought that they would just try to run the clock out from there rather than score as early as they did. Joe Burrow would ultimately get in with a rushing touchdown on a sneak. they would regret leaving all that time on the clock. They would regret it. Bo Nix led a drive. Sure, he reverted back to some tendencies of looking through a progression and then just scrambling out, but he would also deliver some great catches on the sideline to none other than Cortland Sutton back-to-back. And then he would find Javonte Williams on a very short pass to get it to 4th and manageable. But with 14 seconds left and no timeouts left, the Broncos had to either take a shot or at least get something out of bounds and closer to the red zone. Bo Nix wanted it all. He would take the shot. He would throw up a prayer, scrambling to his right and off of his back foot from 25 yards out to a leaping Marvin Mims Jr., who is both boxing out Mike Hilton and being covered by Cameron Taylor-Britt, I believe. And he would moss the shit out of both of them for the game-tying touchdown. Potentially. And it didn't have to be that way. Right after that miraculous play was made, and credit to Bo Nix for it, he wanted desperately to stamp that and go for 2. He was signaling for it. But Sean Payton wanted to be a little scared bitch and go for the PAT, tying up the ball game and sending it into overtime, rather than trying to allow the Broncos to win it on their own terms. Because why would any sane head coach with high intellect decide to get themselves in a score to win situation in sudden death with a Bengals team that managed to mount the drive that they just did, and not directly compound on the momentum that you just gained from mounting that same exact drive in response? So shit was bound to get chaotic from there. But there we are. The Bengals would start out with the ball. Luckily, the Broncos defense decided to lock in from there and force the Bengals to punt. The Bengals defense would then tighten up, recognizing that their season was on the line if they lose this one, or they would be out of the playoff contention altogether, losing this one. They stepped up and made the plays they needed to make to force the Broncos to punt. It looked like after another Tee Higgins catch, the game was done. A field goal attempt from 15 yards out, from 33 yards out. Should be simple. Not for K. York, who decided to revert to his Browns tenure and missed the fucking field goal off the left upright to extend the overtime period. Luckily, though, the Bengals defense retained some ounce of capability and forced the Broncos to punt the ball, where they would then finally, after multiple contributions from Yoshi Voss and then Higgins again, he would be the one to not only end off the ball game with a 3-yard toe tap touchdown catch, but he would also save the Bengals season momentarily. So they come out with the 30-24 win in overtime, with Joe Burrow going for 412 passing yards and 3 touchdown passes on 79.6% completion, which extended his streak of 250-plus yards and 3 or more touchdowns in a game to 8, and giving him the continued lead over Tom Brady's streak. Tee Higgins would have a monstrous game apparently he had made note of the fact that this could be his final game in Cincinnati as a Bengal, apparently, which is interesting. He would have 11 catches for 131 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jamar Chase would have 9 catches for 102 yards on the other end, and Gesicki would have 10 receptions for 86 yards. Multiple people just ate in this game. Similar case for the Broncos. It did not always look like that, but it was certainly needed on their end to try to keep pace with a Bengals offense that is just so lethal. Bo Nix would have 219 passing yards and 3 touchdown passes with an interception on 77.4% completion. Marvin Mims Jr. would have 8 receptions for 103 yards and 2 touchdowns, with Cortland Sutton getting 5 receptions for 55 yards and a touchdown catch. Again, Bengals stay alive momentarily with that one, but still with other factors playing in, they are not totally scot-free just yet. We'll get into that in a little later, though. To cap off the games that were watched by myself in this one, the Lions and 49ers game last night started out pretty interesting. I was occupied, so I did not catch most of the action up until the second quarter, very late in the second quarter. But it looked as though the 49ers were really trying to spoil the Lions' party here. Ricky Pearsall was getting targeted early and often. He would eventually have a career night and would open up the scoring for the game as a whole. But Jameson Williams was on a similar path as well, as he would respond with a rushing touchdown. The 49ers would then drive down with the likes of Isaac Guerendo and George Kittle to then get it out to Kyle Juszczyk for a touchdown to open up the lead to 8. I had missed this play, but watched it in post as they pulled out their best Boise State Statue of Liberty impression. The Lions did, with Amon-Ra St. Brown getting the shortest of catches and then running an elite hook and ladder to Jameson Williams. That would become a 41-yard touchdown catch and run from Williams. Even with that being said, the game was not tied, and the 49ers will go on yet another touchdown drive, aided by a 40-yard catch from Pearsall and a 9-yard touchdown run from Brock Purdy somehow. Now, at this point, this is where the game would begin for me in terms of watching it. The Lions would try their hardest to respond, taking 5 minutes off the clock and gaining 62 yards overall, with Jared Goff making some nice passes to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jahmyr Gibbs trying his hardest to contribute, but getting stuffed just short of the line of the game. On 4th and 3, in the 49ers territory, you'd figure that the Lions are going to go for it. They almost had it, but Renardo Green, the rookie corner from Florida State, would knock out an attempted pass to Sam Laporta, and they would turn the ball over on downs. The 49ers would have an optimal chance to respond, especially after a dime of a pass to Isaac Guerendo out of the backfield to open it up and get them closer and closer and closer to field goal range for Jake Moody. But that is the illusion that Jake Moody gives off to you. You can put him in a respectable range to kick a field goal, and he will still find a way to make you severely question your decision making. Somehow, some way, he misses the 51-yard field goal that could have very much given them an 11-point lead. But they had to settle for just a 1-possession margin of victory to end off the half. Now, the third quarter would begin with the Lions responding hastily. 5 minutes and 2 seconds off the clock, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams getting involved immediately and having multiple points of history get displayed here, as Amon-Ra St. Brown would be noted as having the second most receptions in a receiver's first 4 seasons, behind none other than Michael Thomas. And Jameson Williams would also be displayed as having the tie for the most reception touchdowns of at least 50 or more yards in this season, with Jamar Chase also having 4. Nick Bosa, after all that, would stuff Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield after he tried to shake off somebody else, slammed him down to the ground completely, before within a few plays, whatever is left of Allen Robinson II at this point managed to get a 21-yard catch to give them first and goal on the 49ers' 10-yard line. Sam Laporta would repay his debts and get in for a 6-yard touchdown. Then, Tim Patrick would get the 2-point conversion to tie up the ball game. The 49ers, with the help of once more rookie Pearsall, and also Jawan Jennings and George Kittle, would get them in goal-to-goal situation as well, almost immediately. I thought this is a rushing touchdown. They listed as a passing touchdown. Either way, Deebo Samuel Sr. would manage to get in for a 5-yard touchdown to give them another lead. The Lions would be settling for a field goal after a nice dot to Sam Laporta, but they would ultimately stall out. They were aided, though. They were surely aided. I mean, Brock Purdy was playing so well, and then he decided to start playing like absolute dog shit. Real stuff. I mean, bro. The 2 plays on this possession, now obviously with it being what it was, it's just 1 play. They would be bailed out after the first play from scrimmage on this possession, as he would throw an interception to Kirby Joseph. But Brian Branch, for whatever reason, decided to just completely push off, and that drew a defensive pass interference. They get another shot at 1st and 10, this time from midfield. What does Brock Purdy decide to do? Throws it Kirby Joseph's way again. The league leader in interceptions. And you gave him back-to-back chances at the ball. You decided to test him on back-to-back plays, knowing that he just picked you off the first time, and it didn't count. Why would you go that way again and just gift it to him? So the Lions promptly got a touchdown drive out of that, with Amon-Ra St. Brown getting in from 4 yards out. The 49ers would have a chance to respond. George Kittle would make some productive plays, and it would yet again, after 3 consecutive incomplete passes, come down to the leg of none other than Jake Moody, who would miss his second field goal on the night, this time from 58 yards out. Bates would show him how it's done and get it in after another solid catch from Sam Laporta. Brock Purdy clearly didn't learn his lesson. He clearly didn't learn his fucking lesson. Man, he would quite literally, after multiple penalties on the Detroit defense, and with a good opportunity to put up a touchdown drive and take the lead, he threw yet another interception. Now this one is Kirby Joseph making a great play on the ball. He worked them completely. But shouldn't you be trying to keep the ball out of harm's way as the quarterback at this point? I don't know. Maybe you should be trying to do that, right? I would have to believe so. It was the Jahmyr Gibbs show from there. He would see 3 touches on this drive, and he would ultimately be the one to put the ball game away effectively with a 30-yard run. The 49ers would actually get a touchdown, but it wasn't led by Brock Purdy. You see, on a sack that Brian Branch had on him, it was reported that he suffered an elbow injury. And obviously, we know how an elbow injury has affected Brock Purdy before. They immediately, as he would state after the game, they would immediately check to see if this was another UCL tear for him. It derailed the NFC Championship game for him in the 22 NFC Championship. So they had to check that out and make sure that it wasn't that. It was not, but it is a standard elbow injury. And he had stated numerous times that he would go for an MRI at some point today and get it checked out. So there will probably be some news on the full extent of this thing later on. In comes Josh Dobbs, who would immediately reconnect with his former Tennessee running mate in Jaywan Jennings. I'm not talking about Titans. I'm talking about the Tennessee Volunteers. Find him on numerous occasions before getting it in to the likes of George Kittle. And then on 2nd and goal, scrambling for a touchdown. But the game was over by that point. Too little and way too fucking late for them. Multiple pieces of history would be set in general and for both teams. So just follow along. The Lions would break a 14-game losing streak against the 49ers in the 49ers home stadium. Their last win prior to yesterday night, in this case, came all the way back on November 2nd, 1975, when they were still at Candlestick Park. Brock Purdy would continue his woes on Monday Night Football, despite having a career high in passing yards with 377. He is now 1-3 with 4 touchdown passes and 8 overall interceptions. The Lions, to this point, have become the only undefeated team on the road this season. The first team to do that since the 2020 Kansas City Chiefs. They have also extended their streak of games won when entering the 4th quarter with a lead to 23. Jameson Williams would become the 3rd Lions wide receiver since 1950 to record a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown in the same game. Amon-Ra St. Brown would catch his 12th touchdown in the game, which is the most for a Lions wide receiver in a single season since Calvin Johnson. Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown would also be tied for the most games in a season with a touchdown reception each in a specific game. That honor would go to Terry Barr and Gail Codgel of the Lions in 1963, who also did it in 6 such games. They would have a chance, the Lions and Williams and Brown, St. Brown more specifically, to do that next week. The interesting thing about having Codgel here as well is that he would manage to get 10 touchdowns in this 1963 season while playing on both sides of the ball. You see, as I was checking things out, he played split end on the defensive side of the ball and was also listed as a wide receiver, standing at 6'3", 200 pounds. So this man was generating pressure on some old person's favorite quarterback back in the day, and then also hauling in touchdown catches like it was nothing. It's pretty interesting. You learn something new every fucking day. Now, as far as the numbers for this game go, Goff would have yet another game without an interception and 3 or more touchdown passes, putting him in Brady's territory with games in a single season in which this was the case. His 303 passing yards and 3 touchdown passes went along with 76.5% completion. Jahmyr Gibbs would have 117 rushing yards and 46 receiving yards with a rushing touchdown. Like I said, Jameson Williams would lead the way with 2 total touchdowns and have 77 receiving yards on 5 catches. Laporta would have 6 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown, and Amon-Ra St. Brown would have 8 receptions for 60 yards and an aforementioned touchdown. They have set a franchise record, or I believe a general NFL record. They are in the territory for a franchise to have, I believe it's 4 different players reach over 10 total touchdowns in a season. The Lions have just been dominating all season long outside of a couple hiccups here and there. And yet still, they could finish as a 14 or 15 win team and are still currently in danger of not even having a first round bye. You see, there's just so much to uncover here, but I will get to that in just a bit. We move on to some of the other action here. There's honestly nothing to talk about in this Chargers-Patriots game. I mean, what the fuck? Barring a potential collapse, Gerard Mayo is going to stay the head coach. There's no collapse here. You just straight up got your ass kicked against Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. The main headlines to take away from here are that Justin Herbert would become the most prolific passer in terms of yardage through their first 5 NFL seasons, logging over 20,700 plus over the course of his first 5 years. McConkey would also set multiple Chargers receiving franchise records as a rookie, or well, as it pertains to rookies. His total of 77 catches with 1,054 yards have given him the most receptions and yardage for a Chargers rookie receiver since that season in 2013 of Keenan Allen, with a few less receptions in 71 and a few less yards. Herbert in this game would have 281 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, with McConkey accounting for 2 of them and 94 receiving yards on 8 catches. Quentin Johnston managed to haul in 48 yards and 5 catches somehow, while still having a few drops here and there. J.K. Dobbins would also make his return and have 76 rushing yards and a touchdown on 19 carries, although Gus Edwards would be out of the game with injury. Drake May would have just 117 passing yards and a touchdown. He got so bad that they would have Jacoby Brissett come in for just a little bit. Yeah, not much to write home about there. Like, that was just an atrocious ball game. I'm not going to lie to you. All right. Raiders-Saints. The Raiders will go on and win their second consecutive game. They're so fucking lucky that the Saints are just trash. But at the very least, the Saints did manage to put up double-digit points and not get shut out like they did last week. The main takeaway from this game, obviously neither of these teams are playoff teams. They're both shitty, and they both have these records of 4-12 and 5-11 for a reason. But the saving grace for the Raiders this entire season has been Brock Bowers, and he has etched himself in the history books as well, becoming the most prolific rookie tight end in NFL history when it comes to yardage, as he surpassed the record set by Mike Ditka. He has become the most accomplished rookie receiving threat in NFL history, as he has caught, to this point, 108 passes this season, which broke the record set by Pickett and McKee just last season. He's going to be a Pro Bowler. He's going to be a Pro Bowler, man. There is no doubt about it in my mind. It was also mentioned that he has a good chance to break the overall record for catches in a season by a tight end, which stands at 116. I believe they mentioned that Zach Ertz was the player to set it, but I can check that out really quickly. Yes, it is very much Zach Ertz, who in 2018 did exactly that while logging 1,163 yards. It's impressive work. He is nowhere near the overall yardage mark when it comes to the top number for tight ends in a season. But let me tell you something. If he's playing like this, he keeps it up, he could eventually reach that point. And he will lead all receivers in this one with 77 receiving yards on 7 catches. Amir Abdullah, on the other hand, has kind of turned back the clock a little bit. This man managed to log 23 total touches for 147 total yards in this game. They should have rewarded him with a touchdown. Aiden O'Connell did good work, having 2 touchdowns in this ballgame, not throwing an interception, and throwing for 242 yards. Spencer Rattler, on the other hand, a 1-to-2 TD to interception ratio, 218 passing yards, 46 yards on the ground. And Juwan Johnson having 6 catches for 66 receiving yards in this one, with Boston Moreau following that up. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was waived by the Chiefs, was picked up by the Saints, and he would contribute just a little bit. 7 total touches for 32 total yards, 30 total yards in this game. 2 sorry franchises going at it. Somebody's got to win, and with the help of an elite player as a rookie, they got it done. Cowboys-Eagles. How about them fucking Cowboys, huh? You get the brakes beaten off you by not even their starting quarterback, because Jalen Hurts is still dealing with the ramifications of the protocol. In comes Kenny Pickett, and despite him making a stupid-ass play at some point in this ball game, just completely falling down to the fucking ground, trying to launch the ball and failing to do exactly that, that guy still managed to pull off a 34-point win against this Dallas team. What the fuck? Like, you gotta make it make sense at some point. For the early portion of this game, it's not even like Saquon Barkley was doing a whole lot of damage, but it was the Cowboys self-sabotaging themselves. You see, Cooper Rush would throw multiple interceptions to Chauncey Gardner-Johnson alone in this game, including an interception return for a touchdown by him to open up the scoring in the game overall, before the Cowboys would then get it to Jalen Tolbert for their only score of the ballgame. Then you got a punt that Jake Ferguson, a forced fumble by Oren Burks, of all people, on Jake Ferguson, recovered by the Georgia man in Jordan Davis. that would extend their lead to 17-7.
Oh.
Before yet another interception followed and was compounded by a Kenny Pickett rushing touchdown. Was probably a tush push. The lead was 24-7 at that point. It was literally all Eagles for most of the game, to the point where Kenny Pickett seemed to have gotten hurt, and Tanner McKee, of all people, the former Stanford quarterback, I believe, could step in and throw his first NFL touchdown pass to A.J. Brown, who would then launch it into the stands and would recover it back later for a price. Brandon Aubrey would surprisingly miss a field goal from 61 yards out. But, I mean, you're in Philadelphia at that point. You're not in a dome. It was probably the wind, I'll say. But it was that kind of the day for the Cowboys. And it was that kind of day for the Eagles. Saquon Barkley would eventually heat up over the course of the second half, because that's what he's been doing the entire fucking season. That's what the Eagles have been doing the entire fucking season when it comes to their second half play. Although the Bills have now surpassed them in those metrics just a little bit. They are still a top 3 team in that regard. And with a 23-yard run, not only would that be Saquon Barkley's longest rush of the day, but he would reach 2,005 rushing yards, making him the 9th such player to log a 2,000-yard rushing season, and pitting him just 101 yards away from breaking Eric Dickerson's record of 2,105 set in 1984. He has a grand chance to do that next week as the Eagles take on none other than the Giants, who, I don't know, just so happen to be Saquon Barkley's former team. He's going to kill them. He's going to go off for all the yardage he wants, if they allow him to do it. He has stated that he would not be any type of, or have any type of like feeling about being forced to sit out of the game if it comes down to the coaching. But I have a feeling, and many other people have alluded to this, Nick Sirianni recognizes what this could mean. They are not going to have Saquon Barkley sit out for this next game. They're going to do everything in their power to make sure that he gets it early, if anything, so that if he feels the need to want to sit out for the rest of the game, he can bow out as the record holder. But they will not let this moment waste away. They're going to go for it. I'm absolutely sure of that. His 31 rushes for 167 yards led all rushers in this game. Easy. Devontae Smith would have 6 receptions for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns, with A.J. Brown having a passing or receiving touchdown of his own, despite having just 36 yards receiving. Cowboys, on the other hand, 147 yards per Cooper Rush, just 53.6% completion, and a 1-to-2 touchdown to interception ratio. Rico Donnell had 104 yards on the ground. I'm sure most of that was garbage time yardage.
3 times.
Speaking of the Giants, I mean, they can have a little something to say about that. Maybe this is a fluke. I don't know. Drew was locked the fuck in, bro. He was locked in. Joe Flacco, for a good portion of this game, especially by throwing an interception to start things out to Dane Belton, he got there over the course of the game, but it took a little while for him to get there. I'm not going to lie. Even Matt Gay would miss a field goal. So the Colts were just cold for quite a while. And the Giants were just out of their minds, honestly. They played a game so unlike themselves. Quite literally. I mean, Malik Neighbors, a 31-yard touchdown, and then a 59-yard touchdown to give him 2 on the day. Darius Slayton stumbling into the end zone for a 32-yard touchdown. Wendell Robinson getting in the end zone off of a short pass despite being utilized like a slot wide receiver without any true reward. The Colts would eventually have some things to say about that with the help of Jonathan Taylor. But in the midst of that, you would have the likes of Amir Smith-Marset getting a 100-yard kickoff return for touchdown to open up the lead to 15. The Colts would try to make things interesting with touchdown drives by Alec Pierce capping this one off. Malik Neighbors, again, the aforementioned 59-yard receiving touchdown. They would respond to that with Michael Pittman having one of his better performances this season and getting in to the end zone on this one. But ultimately, with a Drew Lock rushing touchdown, the game would be effectively over, which was just made a little worse by the fact that Joe Flacco would throw yet another interception, which led to a Giants field goal from Graham Gano, and then another fumble from Joe Flacco, forced by Kayvon Thibodeau, and recovered by the Giants to end off the game. 45 points by the Giants. They break their streak of games without more than 30 or so points. And they get their first and albeit only win at home this season. So they avoid having their winless streak at home for the first time since fucking 1974. But again, like I alluded to, you gotta try to go to Philadelphia and stop Saquon Barkley to be the team that stops Saquon Barkley from breaking the record. And it just ain't gonna happen, bro. So tough luck. The Colts would lose out on their ability to get into the playoffs with this loss as well. And again, 330 yards from Joe Flacco, but a sloppy overall game. Again, precursor though. You would need to stop Saquon Barkley from getting 101. And while Jonathan Taylor only averaged 3.9 yards on the ground, he managed to get 125 yards in this ballgame and 2 touchdowns. That's an easier task said than done. Meanwhile, for the Giants, Drew Lock had 5 total touchdowns and just 6 incompletions with 309 passing yards. Malik Neighbors would have 7 catches for 171 yards with the aforementioned 2 touchdowns, bringing him to 1,140 total yards on the season, despite missing time due to injury. Wendell Robinson also added 5 receptions for 71 yards. As for Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman, they combined for 15 total catches and 237 total yards with 2 total touchdowns. Productive, but again, I guess not enough to keep pace with the fucking Giants for some reason. Like, that's just okay. I mean, I guess. Titans lose to the Jaguars in a battle of ass. Mason Rudolph did exactly what you expect Mason Rudolph to do. Are you really surprised? He's gonna try his best to manage the game for you, but he'll throw some reckless balls that just completely cost the team a chance at victory. That's his special. That's what he does. This is not surprising to literally anybody. Mac Jones didn't have to do much more than that. I mean, standard game manager game. Standard elite game for a game manager. 2 touchdown passes, just 174 yards, just 7.9 yards per pass attempt. No need to push the ball down the field because Mac Jones can't do it. He cannot fucking throw the ball deep. You already know this. Keep everything short and keep everything underneath, and you're Gucci. Jags ended up being Gucci. Their rushing attack is not. again, this could be an O-line issue as well. But now, again, it's just looking like, I don't know, like you have no clear way to determine who is your true number one running back right now. At this point, it just looks like a by-committee system. It just fluctuates time and again. Travis Etienne Jr. nor Tank Bigsby had a good game rushing. And the team overall combined for 3.7 yards per carry. They ended up getting 122 overall. But that's not necessarily, like, again, in terms of ball control, sure. You didn't even win that. But I guess. Brian Thomas Jr. would log 7 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown, setting multiple Jaguars franchise rookie receiving records and getting up to 80 receptions, 1,179 yards, and 10 touchdowns on the season. Yet another wide receiver out of LSU who is getting his great rookie season wasted by bad quarterback play and just a dysfunctional organization surrounding him. Like, the fact that that is happening in quite literally the same season is ridiculous. Tajay Spears for the Titans would have 95 yards on the ground on 20 carries. Calvin Ridley would have 5 receptions for 84 yards in this one as well. Moving on to the Bucs and the Panthers. Oh my gosh. Bro. The fact that the debate is about Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow even to an extent, to Jared Goff even to an extent, to Saquon Barkley to an extent, even with him being a running back, it's warranted. This man, Baker Mayfield, has been having a grand season for himself. This happens to be his best season as a pro so far. It was looking a little rough to start out this season. And obviously last season was exceptional on a prove-it deal. He had one of his more redeemable seasons, keeping turnovers to a minimum and having a career high in passing touchdowns. He has smashed every bit of the expectation that he had been given. Yes, the Bucs may have lost a few games that they probably shouldn't have, but this man has been balling out. 42 total touchdowns for himself to go along with 4,279 passing yards after this game and 39 passing touchdowns, which is top 5 in the league. In this game alone, he had as many touchdown passes as incompletions to go along with 359 passing yards. And you want to know the interesting part about that? They had a graphic that displayed that not only is Mayfield having his best season against the pressure, but all 5 of his touchdown passes in this game alone came when he was being blitzed. When the pressure was right in his face. He delivered absolute rockets to everybody, including the random tight end, but mostly to the likes of Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan. Jalen McMillan had 2 receiving touchdowns in this game, going along with 51 yards. But this man, Mike Evans, with his 8 receptions for 97 yards and 2 touchdown catches in this one, gets ever so close to reaching 1,000. He would only need 85 more yards to get there. And once more, you are getting a matchup against the Saints without Marshawn Lattimore. They just allow a player in Brock Bowers to get 77 receiving yards. I find the odds in Mike Evans' favor. He can very much get it and keep his streak alive, giving him the longest streak, I believe, because I believe he's still in a tie with Jerry Rice. The longest such streak of 1,000-yard campaigns to open up a career. Now, I can check that, but I believe that that should be the case. Oh, well, okay. So, again, the record is 11 by, of course, Jerry Rice. Mike Evans would tie it, and he can very much do that. Barring anything crazy. The Saints are just, like let's just put it like this. The Saints are literally bad. In terms of passing yardage, they have actually given up the 26th most. Or 27th most, even. In the league. The streak is going to be tied. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised next week. Just don't. Bryce Young in this one would have 2 touchdown passes and 203 yards. He got off to a hot start, but cooled off tremendously. It didn't help that he lost a couple fumbles that killed the momentum on some specific possessions. Adam Thielen, though, has been turning around his season completely. 5 receptions for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. He has quite literally taken it back to his days in Minnesota. At least over the past few weeks. Now, this overall season has been a struggle. But, I don't know, man. That is crazy to consider. And again, I didn't think they were dead serious, but I first saw it in Madden, and now I'm seeing it here. They actually have Velus Jones Jr. as a sort of running back hybrid for some reason. That's surprising to me. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, wow. I mean, damn. a long way from where he was. Let's just say that. All right. Oh, something just came through. I will check that out later. Dolphins, Browns to cap off the game action. Tyler Huntley would get his revenge against the Browns in a game that saw him go for a rushing touchdown, complete 84.6% of his passes, and actually throw a touchdown pass to Johnny Smith in this one, throwing for 225 yards and also leading the team in rushing with 52 yards. Tyreek Hill would have an actually good game with Tyler Huntley at their center, as they would actually try their best to make sure he was accounted for. He caught all 9 of his targets and got 105 receiving yards. Former Seahawk Dwayne Eskridge would even manage to step in and get a catch here. They were going to be depleted just a little bit because Jalen Waddle was out with injury. That's understandable. You would have Tyrell Dodson catch the only interception forced by the Dolphins defense in this one. But still, Dorian Thompson-Robinson just played like absolute ass. And again, there's just an entire cloud looming over the whole of the Browns quarterback room. The whole of it. For a man to average 3.6 yards per pass attempt, throw the ball 47 times in a game, and complete nearly just half of them, while also throwing for only 170 yards. If I thought that Geno Smith was having a rough time stretching the ball down the field, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine having to sit down, watch that game, and see Dorian Thompson-Robinson throw check down after check down after check down and not even complete all of them. Or a good portion of them at least. If you're going to have your passes travel that short or that low in trajectory pertaining to distance, you best be completing way more than just 51% of your passes. So they ultimately fucked themselves over with that. Like, there is no shot. That is disgusting. Jerry Jeudy would have 12 receptions for 94 yards to absolutely no avail. And the Dolphins would win it 20-3. Just absolutely atrocious. That's really all I have to say for that one, and that will do it as far as the action goes. Now, as other developments, as far as other developments go, there are lots. Yeah. You would have Teddy Bridgewater earlier, before the action, unretire and rejoin the Detroit Lions. I'm not exactly sure as to why, but he's coming off of winning a state championship with his high school, I believe, or winning a championship with his high school that he was coaching. And so I guess he decided to give it another try. I don't think he's necessarily expecting to play, but maybe he is looking to ascend to a role on the coaching staff with the team if he's willing to rejoin them as a quarterback first. Because he's not going to play. We know that. CeeDee Lamb with his yet another shoulder injury, or re-aggravating the same shoulder injury, despite having played on it for all that time, will finally succumb to it, and he would be taken out for the rest of the season. I already mentioned that Kenneth Walker III was out for the rest of the season. It would come out that Deshaun Watson and the Browns general manager would rework and restructure his contract to where they would not incur as heavy of a cap hit as they would have if his contract remained fully guaranteed. I don't necessarily know how much it does help them, because they need a lot more than what just a few little dollars will provide for them. But at the very least, they can try to go out and get something to happen. Bring in somebody. Although, does anybody want to come and play football for Cleveland? Like, just ask yourself that question, and then you'll truly understand. Like, hey, you can, like, doing this is alright, but, like, you're freeing up that money for what? Who the hell are you going to convince to sign with your fucking team? Knowing that you've played this badly for this. I just don't see it. But whatever. Be detailed on Thursday that Pete Carroll, former Seahawks head coach, would actually have interest in the job for the Chicago Bears. And rather, this came out on Wednesday, but it was just before the Seahawks-Bears matchup. You cannot make up the timing for a report like that from Adam Schefter. Absolute craziness. Initially, when I saw it, I was kind of confused, but I had to let it settle in for a bit. And then I began to understand. I mean, you had a similar case with Pete Carroll taking Russell Wilson under his wing, and we saw how fruitful that development ended up coming to be. Caleb Williams is a similar prospect. And also, there is a USC connection from there, Pete Carroll being the former coach at USC in the early to mid-2000s, and Caleb Williams being the Heisman winner at USC. Could be a match made in heaven, even though Pete Carroll is a bit more defensive in-run oriented, which is exactly what you'd be asking for at that moment. You can't get much worse than Matt Eberflus, so the move may not be a bad one. And you're probably not retaining Thomas Brown. So, yeah, something's got to give. You gotta make a decision. You can't keep him. His time management just seems to be so porous. So I wouldn't even bother making that move, man. The Bucs would re-sign Shaq Barrett after he would unretire following the incident in which his daughter drowned and would force him into retirement in the first place. I guess he may just be in optimal football shape again, or at least in the right headspace to get back into playing. Although, again, to say that is a stretch. You losing your daughter to something like that is not necessarily going to... The feeling of that is not going to go away. That's going to stick with you forever. I'm not saying that's just going to disappear. That's far from the case. But he may very well be willing to play football again. So, if he does end up taking some snaps, we'll see how he does. Chuba Hubbard will be placed on IR after having a career season for himself. That would see him finish off this specific campaign with the Panthers, despite them being as bad as they were, with a career-high 1,195 rushing yards, to go along with 10 rushing touchdowns on the season, on 250 carries. Those yards made him the 10th highest in the league. He had a bit of a surge last season, and it came into full form this season, with a few more reps in hand. So that's credit to Chuba Hubbard. Meanwhile, for the Jets, they clearly need a lot of fucking help. They've got to start somewhere. Frankly, I believe that comes from firing Woody Johnson, or having Woody Johnson recuse himself of ownership. But of course, he's not going to do that just yet, so they want to look into more head coaches and GMs. The first head coach that they would plan to look into would be none other than Rex Ryan, former Jets head coach, and their most successful head coach in the past couple of decades. Winning, or at least making it to, I should say, back-to-back AFC championships. He has been on TV for the entire season, just fucking get pissed off at what the Jets have been doing. And he understands the system. He knows the organization and understands that they can be way more than this. He's proclaimed it time and again. And if he does get hired, we'll see if he's going to back up his word. But again, like I said in an earlier video, you can ensure that regardless, you're going to get the most in terms of physicality and discipline out of Rex Ryan. If you try any of that shit against, specific teams with him, you try any of that with him as a coach, he will make life a living hell for you, and he is going to drill it into your fucking mind until you understand it. And if you don't understand it, you're out, because you're not bought into the culture. you're not bought in to winning. And he's not going to waste his time with you. That's the truth about Rex Ryan. They are also set to interview Ron Rivera, another defensive-minded head coach who has led some historically bad offenses over the past few seasons. All I'm saying is, yes, the offense is struggling generally, and they did have some decent performances. But you're going to fire Robert Saleh, another defensive-minded coach. Not necessarily a historically bad offense. Or at least he's not the one to blame for that. It's Nathaniel Hackett's fault. You're going to not keep Robert Saleh, but have another person serve the same purpose. He's going to be controlling the defense if Ron Rivera is there. He's not going to be worried about the offense. You're once again leaving it in the hands of Nathaniel Hackett, who is going to commit fucking arson with the goddamn materials. There is no reason why he should be the offensive coordinator still. And I'm telling you what, he should be fired at the end of the season. He should be fired at the end of the fucking season. There's no excuse. Honestly, it would have been better for that game, the Bills game, to have stayed at 40-0, so that his ass could be gone on the spot. They may very well be waiting it out until the end of the season. So, though, there's honestly not a lot to really have in terms of certainty when it comes to this organization. Every other day just unravels yet another twist and turn in the development of this. For GM, seeing as they have an interim right now, they are also apparently in play to interview none other than ESPN analyst and former front office member, I should say, for multiple NFL teams, Louis Riddick. I had no idea that he had interest in the job. The way he can break down games, though, it seems as though he would have an idea of what he's doing. He has decades of experience as a member of the front office and an executive in the NFL. So I think it would be worth a shot. It's kind of an outside-of-the-box move, but you need anything you can get at this point. It would also be detailed just now that the Patriots would waive Yannick Ngakoue. Did not know that they had him. He hasn't produced much with them. It would also be detailed just now through a Fox Sports notification that Purdy got his MRI scan and they found that his elbow was intact. But there is probably a sort of sprain there, if anything. And so he will need time for that to heal. There's no designation on whether or not he'll miss the season finale, but we'll see about that. That'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.